You have just read about how the brain works. As you watch this video, keep the following questions in the back of your mind. How do the different parts of the brain affect the way students learn? What does this mean for how I should structure my lessons? The human brain is an incredible organ. It works continuously, even when we are sleeping, and uses about 20% of the calories we eat every day in order to function. It is the place where all thought, sensory information such as sights and sounds, and even personality are processed. It is the place where learning occurs, and it's important for us to understand exactly how the different parts of the brain shape learning, so that we, as teachers, can design our lessons in a way that harnesses the power of the brain instead of working against it. Let's start by learning about the different parts of the brain and their functions. We'll start with the exterior part, or surface of the brain. If you were to open up your own head and peek inside, these are all the parts you would be able to see. Here we can see the frontal lobes. This part right here, just behind the forehead, is called the prefrontal cortex. These lobes deal with planning and thinking. They help us use thought and reason to rationally solve problems. They are also the part of the brain that creates your individual personality. The reason you are the way you are is thanks to the frontal lobes. And if they are somehow damaged, say by a hard hit to the head, your personality and behavior might be completely changed. Here we can see the temporal lobes. These deal with interpreting sound, music, face and object recognition, and some parts of long-term memory. The occipital lobes here are used for visual processing. They help you make sense of the things you see around you. The parietal lobes here are used for spatial orientation, calculation, and some types of recognition. Finally, here we see the motor cortex. It helps control body movement and speech, while the somatosensory cortex here helps process the sensations of touch. Now, let's take a look at the interior part of the brain, the areas we would have to cut down past the surface to see. The brainstem here is the deepest part of the brain. The brainstem is where bodily functions such as heartbeat, respiration, and body temperature are monitored and controlled. It is also responsible for keeping the brain alert and ready to process information or make your body react to something through a process called reticular activating system, or RAS. Above the brainstem is a collection of structures called the limbic system. This system is made up of four main parts. The thalamus, which is the first stop made by all of the information that enters the brain through our senses. The hypothalamus, which controls the basic functions of our body, including breathing and sleeping, and generally makes sure everything is running smoothly in homeostasis. The hippocampus, which helps us store information in our long-term memory and make meaning out of information. And finally, the amygdala, which helps regulate our emotions. Something that's very interesting to note is that the two structures in the brain primarily responsible for long-term remembering are located in the emotional area of the brain. This means that there is a very strong link between learning and emotion. And as teachers, we should try to help students remember things by connecting them emotionally to the material we teach them. This can include using examples that are relevant to them, having them role-play a certain scenario, or use music or art to illustrate about a certain concept. You'll learn more strategies for helping students create an emotional connection later on. Let's keep exploring the brain. Next, we'll look at the cerebrum. The cerebrum makes up about 80% of the brain and is covered in these little wrinkles called fissures. This fissure running down the middle is what divides the brain into left and right hemispheres, much like the equator divides hemispheres on a globe. Down here we have the cerebellum. The cerebellum is a powerhouse for learning. It helps coordinate complex movements and stores muscle memories that we do automatically without thinking, such as tying our shoes. The cerebellum helps us fine-tune our movements, emotions, and perceptions, and helps us understand the complexity of things. Your entire brain is made up of brain cells. There are two types of brain cells, neurons and glial cells. Glial cells help hold neurons together and keep harmful substances from damaging them. The neurons are what make thinking or human cognition possible. Information passes from our senses through to our brain by the way of these neurons. The body converts sensory input such as sight or taste into an electrical current. Thoughts, in other words, are electricity. They are little pulses that pass through our body, and your brain knows how to make sense of them. It releases chemicals called neurotransmitters that help create pathways, connecting this information with different meanings that may or may not cause you to react in a certain way. Now, this is extremely important, because here we come to the core of what it means to learn. When we learn, we are creating new pathways in the brain. Our neurons are releasing chemicals that create new links between other neurons, something called synaptic changes. We are taking information already stored in our brain and connecting it to new concepts, new ideas, and teaching our brains to better interpret and make meaning out of the things we see around us. In order to make the best use of these synaptic changes, we can structure our lessons so that students learn something new every time we teach them. There should be a balance of knowledge or foundational information, revisiting things students already know, and then a good supply of new, unknown information and experiences. For example, you might have students learning about the different parts of the brain write a song talking about the different parts of the brain, and use a tune or melody that they already know. This is a way of taking new material and balancing it with the student's prior knowledge. Let's review. In this lesson, you learned the different parts of the brain work together to shape the way we learn. You learn that the frontal lobes shape rational thinking, problem-solving, and personality. The temporal lobes deal with interpreting sound, music, face and object recognition, and some parts of long-term memory. The occipital lobes are used for visual processing. The parietal lobes are used for spatial orientation, calculation, and some types of recognition. The motor cortex helps control body movement and speech. The brainstem monitors and controls bodily functions such as heartbeat, respiration, and body temperature. It also controls the RAS, or reticular activating system, that makes our body react to outside stimuli. The limbic system is made up of 4 parts. The thalamus is the first place sensory information enters the brain. The hypothalamus controls the basic functions of our body, including breathing and sleeping, and makes sure everything is running smoothly. The hippocampus helps us store information in our long-term memory and make meaning out of information. The amygdala helps regulate our emotions. The cerebrum makes up 80% of our brain, while the cerebellum is the powerhouse for learning because it fine-tunes our movements, emotions, and perceptions. The brain matter itself is made up of 2 kinds of brain cells. Glial cells help keep neurons from being damaged and hold neurons together. Neurons help transmit information in the form of electrical pulses from our senses to our brain. They release chemicals called neurotransmitters that help create new pathways. When we learn, we are creating new pathways. You learn that the 2 structures in the brain primarily responsible for long-term remembering are located in the emotional area of the brain. This means that there is a very strong link between learning and emotion, and as teachers, we should try to help students remember things by connecting them emotionally to the material we teach them. Finally, you learn that in order to make the best use of synaptic changes, when new pathways are created, we can structure our lessons so that students learn something new every time we teach them. There should be a balance of knowledge or foundational information, revisiting things students already know, and then a good supply of new, unknown information and experiences. Remember the questions that you asked yourself at the beginning of this video. Now is a good time to answer these questions. Once you have done that, apply the answers to the themes of this video.